genre.
In the world of Hollywood, movies get greenlit and redlit. They get remade and rebooted. But we are the Ideal. I'm Sam Gasch, and you are listening to Ideal Remake. Thank you for listening to Ideal Remake. We take movies that either have been, will be, or should be remade and talk about what the ideal version of that remake would be. This time we're discussing fish stories and lost podcast episodes. After all, the podcast that got away is always the best one. And reminiscing with me is Presley Peters. So, Presley, is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea a movie that has been, will be, or should be remade?
Well, it has been, but I think it also should be remade.
I tend to agree. I think the only reason it has been is, I looked it up and I'm like, there's more than one thing with this name. But we all kind of only know the
Disney Kirk Douglas one,
Kirk Douglas. I completely blanked on his name real quick. I'm like, it's not Michael Douglas.
No.
It's the other Douglas.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this movie was a recommendation from you. So, before I even do that, Presley, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm Presley. Presley Peters.
Tell us all a little bit about you.
So, I met Sam. I've been living out here in Los Angeles for almost a year at this point, but I met Sam and I've picked up really well.
We met at the house of previous podcast guest, Caitlin Rogers.
Yes. I work in costumes. I'm figuring out my way in this industry, in this beautiful, beautiful industry. I also write, so
yeah,
a bit of 1-2-1-2 there.
Writing is fun for all, unless you're on strike, which time of recording we still are. Time of airing we probably still will be also, but I'm excited to find out. Me too. I mean, this episode goes up June 27th, so it'll be a mystery.
What was the last WGA strike last, 9 weeks?
100 days.
100 days.
Something like that.
Okay. Well.
And that was during the winter. This is during the summer when theoretically they're supposed to be starting to write all the new shows for the coming year. Mm-hmm. So,
and we have a heat wave coming through too, so
I think we're also supposed to be getting June gloom. We'll find out. We don't know. It's going to be warmer than winter.
Yeah.
I came to this recording from being on strike. But, Presley, you suggested 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. What is your history with this movie?
To be honest, I thought that I had seen this movie. I think maybe I had seen it one time when I was a kid. And I didn't remember all that much enjoying it, but I had read the book when I was a teenager in high school, and I loved it, and I still love it to this day, and I still think that it's possibly one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book. So I had ideas of what 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was as a movie, mm-hmm. and we brought it up together, and we started talking about it, and we said that we were going to look into doing an Ideal remake of it.
I also am I feel like I may have seen this when I was a super little kid, watched it with my parents, that sort of thing. But I think it felt very much like I watched it for the first time. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a great movie. There's barely any sexism in it, so it's good.
When you have an all-male cast,
that helps.
That helps. Can't say that it aged all that well in terms of racial...
That's true.
Yeah.
And also the fact when they're dragging sea turtles away to clearly eat them later.
And not just prop sea turtles.
They were real. We had a visceral... I watched it with my friend Diana. We had a visceral reaction of no! No!
Yeah.
And I had a memory of watching them butcher the sea turtle on camera. But then I realized that wasn't this movie. That's the movie Tampopo, which is a chaotic mess of a movie.
And also not 20,000 Leagues.
And also not 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So, how close is the movie 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea to the book?
When I watched this movie, I realized I needed to also reread the book just to make sure I had everything lined up. And
that's not true, but I appreciate it.
I did reread the book.
No, I know. It wasn't necessary.
Oh,
but it was
right. It was important for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't necessary, but I felt the need for myself. But I reread it, and it's surprisingly pretty close. Now, of course, when you adapt a book to a movie, you're going to have to cut up or cut out a lot of parts.
Sure.
That's just par for the course. So there were a few things that were cut out. Namely, one of my favorite scenes, the Coral Cemetery, which I would be willing to argue is possibly the most important scene in the book.
Okay.
Was presented as the first scene where we were introduced to Captain Nemo, which was jarring for me. So that was really where I started to realize, even though this was my first watch through on a certain degree, that this movie should be remade, because I feel like they missed out on a lot of what the heart of the book is in favor of chasing what the visual spectacle was at the time in 1956.
True. And this movie absolutely is a visual spectacle.
Absolutely.
The Coral Cemetery, I think as you're describing it, is when they first find Nemo's ship, the Nautilus, they had, like, there had been a sea battle, and a member of the Nautilus crew had been killed. And so they find the ship empty, mostly, and they see outside that the crew is under the water doing a burial at sea for one of the crew members, and like there's a coral cross that Nemo holds up and places as a grave marker. What is the scene as it exists in the book?
So that scene doesn't come up until the halfway point in the book. Literally, it is the second to last chapter of the first half of the book, and it lays into the Coral Cemetery is actually the last chapter of the first half of the book, because at that time they distributed books in parts. Sure. So we got the first part, and it ended with Captain Nemo having resulted in some sort of battle where somebody dies, and they go out and bury him. And it's a very pivotal moment for the character of Captain Nemo and for the understanding of who Captain Nemo is to Professor Aronnax and Conseil and Ned Land. So to have it be put at the front really, really takes away from one of the most interesting parts of who these characters are, and leaves a lot of like speculation as to how they were going to develop this character over the course of the movie without something so like it was a kingpin in sort of a turning point for this character.
A linchpin.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so I get it, because so in the movie, this is how we're introduced to the character, and it's like, oh, okay, they're burying their dead. It's a crew that cares about each other and like is doing this thing. But as of this moment, we have no other context for the character. At that point in the story, as it exists in the book, what is this a revelation of who he is as a person, or just that he cares about anything at all? What's happening?
So in the first half of the book, what we see of Captain Nemo is he is mysterious. They don't know where he's from. Professor Aronnax isn't able to put a sort of heritage or homeland as to where Captain Nemo might be from.
Based on the timing, I'm assuming it's because he can't do a full phrenology makeup or something like that?
Something like, I don't know, but... But what ends up happening is they go on a bunch of adventures. They go hunting under the water with Captain Nemo. They get to see his ship. They get to understand how it works. And then at one point, Captain Nemo tells them to he basically feeds them, drugs them, and then has them put in a cell while something is happening outside the Nautilus. And so Captain Nemo, all that Professor Aronnax knows is there was banging, there was jostling of the ship before he blacks out from being drugged. Okay. And when he wakes up in his room the next day, Captain Nemo comes and finds him and asks him, "Are you a doctor?" and presents to Professor Aronnax a man with a contusion on his head, and he's dying. And the professor says there's no saving this man. And for the first time in the book, Captain Nemo is no longer mysterious, because we don't ever see an indication as to what his emotions are. We don't ever see an indication as to what his motivations are. Okay. He is merely a man at sea, living by his own rules, until we see him cry over a fallen seaman. And it's at that point when we see him take this body out and bury it in a coral cemetery that we see that maybe he hates something, or maybe he feels for something. And when they come back to the ship after, Professor Aronnax says he'll be safe there. He's not going to be pestered or annoyed in his grave by sharks or crabs or anything. He's going to lay there in that secret coral cemetery forever. And that's where you bury all it, because there's more than one person buried in this coral cemetery. And the captain says, yes, he's safe there from sharks. Safe from sharks and of men. And so it leads into this question of what happened to the captain's ship that caused this person to die. what caused the captain to lie to Professor Aronnax as to how he died. And then they buried this man, and now he's saying that he hates men. And that the dead men are protected from men. So, to have that scene that's so pivotal and poetic in the book be put up front and almost untouched because it's immediately undercut by the squabble of capturing Professor Aronnax, Consul, and Ned Land.
And leaving them to die.
That it takes the air out of such a weighted moment in the book. So.
Interesting. I'm trying to now remember what happens in the middle of the movie.
That's one of the things about this movie is that for a lot of it, and the same thing sort of happens with the book, is you get so wrapped up in seeing all these interesting things that they get to go and see at the sea,
Sure.
that it all starts to become kind of monotonous. And the character is the most interesting part of the movie, even though the visuals are so great. That's the way it should be. That's how you drag the story along.
Yeah.
So in the book, there's a whole bunch of things that happen. They see plenty of fish. Same sort of thing. I feel like the halfway mark in the movie might have been the island where they meet the indigenous tribes.
I feel like that's gotta be towards the end, because it's at that point that like Consul and Ned Land are like, we're gonna go check out the land, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
I feel like the middle, I don't know. I'm generally trying to remember, and I don't, because it might be that the middle of the movie is the squid attack.
It might be. And that's another thing is the squid attack.
No, it can't, because the squid attack's not till after the island, because they use the electricity on the core of the ship. You might be right. It might be them going to the island. Who knows? It's impossible to find out.
I also think that the island, I think it comes in the first half of the book instead of in the second half or at the middle point. Mm-hmm. But that's honestly a bit of a semantics point in all of that. So, but...
Yeah. So for me, let's go through the movie as it exists right now. But basically, no, before I do that, do you remember how old you were or how it happened to be that you read this book for the first time?
I was introduced to Jules Verne because of Journey to the Center of the Earth with Brendan Fraser and Josh Hutcherson.
Great.
I loved that movie when it came out. I go back and watch it with fond feelings, even though it is quite corny.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I watched that movie and I realized it was a book. And I started reading those books. And I realized that Jules Verne was a very interesting and very seasoned scientist as well as a writer. And at the point in time when I was going from middle school into high school or whenever I read those books, I was very much considering to go and be a scientist of some sort.
Oh, fun.
Chasing writing at the same time. So it was a very big crux for me. And I really enjoyed how he made such fantastic things, also so scientific. So I could look up with all these Latin phrases and everything. I'm a research bug. So.
Great. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. Fun. Okay,
that was how
cool.
I got about to reading the book. Yeah.
That's a great way to work your way backwards into it. I love that. Cool. Okay. I guess I'll put a pen in Journey to the Center of the Earth for next time. Put a pin in. Put a pin in.
A pin in it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm holding a pen, but I'm putting a pin in. Okay, so the movie as it exists, it's kind of always existed in the periphery of my knowledge, if I watched it as a kid or not. I'm aware of the Ned Land costume kind of being inspiration for the Popeye outfit, and
yeah,
I remember we had a conversation. I think how we landed on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is because we were talking about characterizations in
it was Poseidon. Was it Poseidon?
No, it was we were watching Poseidon Adventure,
right? But
we were talking about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen,
right?
And we were talking about how a lot of the characterizations in that movie are very good, and we both especially liked the characterization of Captain Nemo.
Yeah,
because it's great. It's very different from this movie.
Yeah. So
is it closer to the book or not?
So the thing about the book is, like I mentioned earlier, Professor Aronnax has a hard time saying where he thinks the captain is from. Mm-hmm. And there's a few things that lead to that. One, he can't put a specific, stereotyped, categorized, Italian, Greek, Turkish, he can't put that on Captain Nemo for some reason. And then Captain Nemo also speaks a language.
Ethnically ambiguous is the term we would use now.
Yeah, ethnically ambiguous. Captain Nemo also speaks a language that to his crew that nobody understands, and when Professor Aronnax meets the captain for the first time, he tries speaking to him in a whole bunch of different languages, to which Captain Nemo responds to none at that point because he's being mysterious.
Sure.
And he understands all of them. But Professor Aronnax doesn't know where he's from. All he can say is that he thinks that he is possibly a Turk and that he is definitely of like a Mediterranean variety in his skin tone.
Okay.
So that he was...
Which is interesting because in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he's worshipping a Hindi god. Mm-hmm. The goddess of death, I think. I can't remember the name of the particular god. Kali. The name of the god is Kali. Necklace of skulls, not even skulls, necklace of heads and faces, and she is the goddess of death. Absolutely, for sure. And so that's who Nemo worships in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And he's like, of all of them, like the most civilized and like proper, and at the same time worships death. So it's a very interesting dichotomy in a character, and he's such an interesting character. And also on his crew, when we're walking up, there's some random guy that goes, "Oh yeah, call me Ishmael." Just like Ishmael just happens to be one of his crew members. The Moby Dick guy happens to be on the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea ship, which makes sense.
Yeah.
You could see how one of them would have picked up the other.
That's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen fun, you know?
For sure.
So,
and if you want to hear a conversation about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, you should listen to that remake that I did with Chris Lord. Anyway, so neither version is particularly close to the way he's put in the book, both are because Nemo is himself an enigma that we don't really ever know that much about, sort of by design. So the movie as it exists is we find out that there's this sea monster that's destroying ships. Professor Aronnax wants to get to Saigon?
He wants to get to Saigon, yeah.
Saigon for reasons I don't remember. But he's also like, there can't no, he's not saying there can't possibly be a monster. He's saying, well, based on what we know, it is possible there could be a monster.
But he's also a scientist, and he's somebody that truly believes that there is a more logical solution.
But he gets contracted by the government, and they get kind of sent out to see if they can go find the monster. And as they're about to give up, they come upon a ship that's been destroyed and is burning down and sinking. But in the distance, they see what is likely the monster, and they fire cannons at it. They hit it, but then that ship hits them. Professor Aronnax and his protege.
Yeah, protege is like a real loose word. It's
protege / manservant.
Yeah, and I'll touch more on this later. But yeah, Consul is his attaché.
Yeah, I mean his name's Consul.
But in the book, he's described as never giving consultation as to what the professor needs.
Oh, interesting.
It's
Great.
Hilarious.
Okay, so the Peter Lorre character, and then Ned Land, who is this, oh yeah, I'm the ultimate sailor. I sing songs and I slay monsters, and I'm a lover of many women. And so the three of them go overboard, and they all find their way to, against all odds, they end up finding this technological marvel of a ship, and they get into the ship and they find, oh my gosh, they're able to walk into the ship, and they manage to get in, and it's completely abandoned, but it's definitely what attacked everything.
Right.
And then they see the coral graveyard, the burial, and then they get captured, and basically Nemo is there because he knows who Professor Aronnax is, and because Professor Aronnax is this intellectual, Nemo is interested in having a conversation and showing the professor kind of the world that Nemo himself has created / inhabits.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything to begin with?
No, I think that's all about right. I think the only thing you might have missed is that Captain Nemo doesn't immediately, in the book he does, but in the movie he doesn't immediately just adopt Aronnax and Consul and Ned Land into his crew. He has them sent back out, and then he starts to lower the water, and he tries to see if Professor Aronnax or Ned Land or Consul are going to leave each other for dead.
Or beg for their lives, which they don't do.
Right, and so they kind of like hold on to the ship. I think I see Ned Land like maybe swim away. It is not a great portrayal of like what Captain Nemo was looking for, or what any of their responses were to being like left for dead.
Sure.
I feel like that could have been done better. But yeah, that was about it.
Yeah. So basically what ends up happening is they explore the bottom of the ocean where they go and harvest fish from the sea.
Fish from the sea, seaweed, sea turtles.
All the things. They can make any sort of food and any sort of thing. They can make cigars and everything from what the bounty of the sea provides. And Ned Land and Consul find a sunken ship, and they go find a treasure chest in the ship. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're going to be rich. But then they get attacked by a shark, and they have to kill the shark. And when they get dragged back on board, Nemo's like, you idiots, no one needs treasure. We use it for ballast. And so Ned Land's like, oh my god. And so like over the course of the movie, Ned Land's slowly stealing from the ballast of the pearl necklaces and everything. But basically it's like our moral systems are different. I'm not a part of the world of man anymore, and so I'm done with their rules. And so as they keep going, they're learning more about kind of the world and the nature of the ship and everything about it. And then they go and Nemo shows Professor Aronnax this prison colony.
And this is like in the later third quarter of the movie.
No, it's got to be earlier because like time is because he has the line later in the movie where the last time I went on land, it was a pretext for murder.
Yeah.
Because this is the moment where Nemo sends them back to their quarters and locks them in so that they can go attack the ship that is carrying some of those slaves, but is also carrying the dangerous materials or whatever they were mining for.
Right.
And Nemo basically reveals is that he used to be one of those prisoners. Most of the people on his ship were prisoners.
He was a slave, yeah.
He was a slave, and they were mining for tools of war. But they managed to escape. They found their special island, and they manufactured this technology. And people have been trying to get Nemo's technology for all this time, and they're using it, and they want to use it for war. This exact thing Nemo doesn't want to do. So Nemo basically goes, and he destroys ships carrying these other materials that as a slave, he himself helped mine for.
Yeah.
Or didn't help mine for, was forced to mine for.
Yeah.
So they take down that other ship. They go to do repairs near an island, and Consul and Ned Land go to collect specimens on the island. Nemo tells them not to go too far because cannibals, because it's a movie from the 50s. And they make a mad dash back. They're followed by a bunch of cannibals, and Nemo electrocutes the ship to like scare them off. And then they dive down and they face off a giant squid.
Yeah.
The scene everyone remembers.
Yeah. Now, the giant squid part is easily one of the coolest parts of this movie, I will say.
Despite the fact that it swims the wrong way.
Sure, but beggars can't be choosers.
Absolutely.
In terms of 1950s special effects, I suppose.
It's true.
Yeah, that's about how the movie goes, and I feel like the squid scene precedes what ends up being the final sequence, where we see Captain Nemo going back to his original island to fix the Nautilus to its former glory.
The Ned Land and Consul had previously figured out and found where they were going and figured it out based on the map. Ned Land seems like an idiot, but is really good at reading maps and is like a really good sailor. Like at the end of the day, he's very good at what he does. And they get a bunch of bottles and they drop bottles into the ocean, and the Navy finds it. So when Nemo gets back to Vulcania, the Navy is there waiting for him to take him down.
Right. And it was really strange because it wasn't explicitly stated as to who the people were that were coming for Ned Land and Consul and Professor Aronnax after the bottles were released.
Sure.
It was almost made to seem like I don't know if it was the military or if it was supposed to be the slavers, because it was very strange. I couldn't quite figure out who they were, which is...
I always just kind of assumed it was the systems of power had finally come for this person with this ultimate technology to take it from him.
I think the reason why I was brought away from thinking that it was a military is because Captain Nemo asks if they're flying any flags, and they say no, which was something that the slavers were doing on their ships.
Oh, that's a good point.
So...
But basically, in order to prevent anyone from getting his technology, Nemo sets the island to explode, and in getting away, Nemo himself is shot, and to prevent anyone from getting his submarine, he's like, we're gonna take this thing down. So his island's gonna explode, the submarine, the Nautilus, is gonna go down, and Aronnax, Consul, and Ned Land manage to escape just before the whole thing goes down, and all of Nemo's technology is lost, as well as Aronnax's notes, but at least he's gone with his life. Mm-hmm. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
What happens in... Did I miss anything?
No, that all sounds about right, yeah.
What else is missing from the book? Does the book end the same way?
No. So the book doesn't make any reference to slavers. It does make reference to the idea that somebody hurt Captain Nemo and a family that he had.
That's right. That does happen in the movie, too. It's like the slavers killed his wife and son.
And then made him a slave.
In order to get to his technology.
Yeah. But what ended up happening in the book is we merely see Captain Nemo find a ship. Again, Captain Nemo is a mysterious character in the book. We don't really ever find out who his enemy truly is. So in the book, what ends up happening is he attacks a ship. The ship attacks back. He tries to wear the ship out. Consul, Aronnax, and Ned Land escape during the fight because they don't want to be brought down with the Nautilus while this attack is happening. Now, there's not really any slavers in the books. Captain Nemo is never written out to be a former slave, nor were his crew. They are all men of mystery up until the moment they die, and even when...
But they do die in the book. They lose this battle with this other ship.
It is also made a little fuzzy about whether or not Captain Nemo dies.
Okay.
Because...
That does sound very Jules Verne.
Yeah, Professor Aronnax gets away and says in this... The story is written out as if it were some kind of journal, or if he was talking to you about a journal that he wrote.
Okay.
And so he talks about it in the end of being
This is not the journal. This is just a tribute to the greatest journal in the world.
Something like that, yeah. Tenacious D. Real digs. We don't know if Captain Nemo dies in the book. He's not shot in any way. He's not hurt in that kind of way. The idea is that if the Nautilus went down, the Nautilus went down. But if it didn't, then it's still out there. And Captain Nemo is a man of the sea through and through. He might actually die at the end. I finished reading the book like last week, and the last few chapters aren't the strongest.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about how it goes. There's no slavers. There's no Volcania where they go and repair the ship.
I mean, I figured that wasn't from Jules Verne because it had the most ridiculous name. Like, oh, we need an island. Volcania. Yeah. Great. Print it.
In the book, they have different parts of the ship built in different nations so that nobody knows what these things are for. They're just
That's very clever. It's very Batman of him.
Yeah, it's very
That's
Batman.
What Batman does.
Yeah. And that's another thing, is Captain Nemo is very much a kind of Batman-ish character.
Okay.
Except he's vengeful in a sort of homicidal way in the books.
He's Ocean Batman.
He's Ocean Batman.
I'm trying to think of something in the ocean that rhymes with bat, and I don't think it's possible.
I got nothing.
Flap man. Nope, that's a bird. I mean, because like manta rays are like ocean flaps. They're sea flaps, but like that doesn't work. I mean, Manta Man is the closest I can think of. And
that's a SpongeBob reference.
It very much is.
Yeah. At the end of the day, once we start working on what this ideal remake is, my biggest idea is Captain Nemo is not as mysterious as he necessarily seems. If you look at this from a subtext sort of view.
Sure, go for it. Tell me about that now.
One of the biggest questions that I had after reading this book, so I'll go ahead and say it. I am a queer man. I'm bisexual. I'll say that out here on the air. But just so you know, while I was reading this, I was feeling like I was reading a lot of queer subtext about a crew full of men on a ship.
Well, it's also historical fact that was the nature of a lot of... I mean, our flag means death notwithstanding. Like, that was the nature of all of these things. It was like, the vast majority of sailors during this time were queer.
Right.
You live on the sea for so long with exclusively male shipmates, it's kind of difficult for that not to be commonplace. Yeah.
One of the things that led to this subtext that I have in mind is that, first off, the subtext that I have in mind for this book to movie to adaptation to this remake is that Professor Aronnax and Consul are very much in a relationship. They're not a master and servant. They're not a professor and his attaché, because in the book, they're never described as just professional acquaintances.
Okay.
In the movie, they
were
are
also close enough in age. I was like, he's awfully old to be an apprentice.
Conceal in the book is 30, and I think Professor Aronnax is like maybe 55.
Okay, fair enough. That's a greater difference. In the movie, they're a lot closer.
They're very much, yeah.
Like this, this is a movie in color. This has to be towards the end of Peter Lorre's acting career.
Yeah. I have this idea, and while I was reading the book, there's a moment in the book where they're caught in a situation. This doesn't appear in the movie. They go to Antarctica and they explore the Antarctic Circle, and they're going to the South Pole, and they manage to get themselves stuck between an iceberg, and they have to figure out how to get out, and they're running out of oxygen because they can't surface to get air. And they get so deprived of oxygen that Professor Aronnax almost like loses consciousness until Consul and Ned Land give him like a tank of air that they were sparing in case somebody needed it for that exact situation. And when that happens, Consul takes his hand and tells him that he wouldn't leave him. He wouldn't do anything. It was a very sentimental moment that said something more than what I think two heterosexual scientist friends would say on a journey like this.
Just friends, maybe roommates even?
Maybe roommates even, yeah. They were roommates.
Got it.
And so it led me into pondering the entire story about, Captain Nemo being so upset about one of his crewmates dying. What did that mean? Did it have more of a meaning? Was there subtext in there? Was there queer subtext in there? Consul and Professor Aronnax, obviously. Ned Land and Consul being friends, but not... I don't think that they're in any sort of way attached like that.
No.
But I feel like Professor Aronnax, once he's brought aboard and he's told that there are all these marvels and mysteries, and there's this mysterious man telling him all these lovely things that he can show him that he's not aware of, it breeds a kind of like come hither sort of situation in my mind.
Absolutely.
From Captain Nemo.
Sure.
So I feel like there's a lot of subtext, and I looked into it, and there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not Jules Verne may or may not have been secretly bisexual. It wasn't exactly illegal to be gay or bisexual in France in 1791. It was basically legalized to say whatever happened in your bedroom behind closed doors was your own private matter, and you couldn't be persecuted by it.
Good.
So...
yeah, okay. One of the things that I did was I gender swapped a few characters just because I'm rarely okay with an all-male cast, certainly in a movie that's made now. I gender swapped both Consul and Aronnax.
Okay.
But their ages are very different. And I, because it was the master and apprentice thing of, I made that much more apparent. Mm-hmm. I had considered the possibility of a romantic entanglement between Nemo and Aronnax. For me, I totally understand where you're coming from. Where I was coming from in my logic was it's the seduction of knowledge, if not physical attraction. It's just I will go anywhere with someone who is able to show me such wonders, and it's a seduction of the mind as opposed to the body. Kind
exactly,
of thing.
Yeah.
And that is what I found interesting, especially because. So the next question I really need to have is, when do we want to set this?
I kind of want to envision it as a period piece still.
So we still can do it. So
right.
The movie itself was made in the 50s, but the book takes place in the 1790s, 1800s.
It takes place in 1866, 67, I think.
So the book was written in 1791, but it took place 80 years in the future?
Sorry. Let me go ahead and clarify. It was written and released in 1870, the book was. The book takes place in 1867.
Okay. Why did you say France 1791?
Because Jules Verne came after, so I was alluding to the fact that it was legal in 1791 for whatever was happening behind closed doors.
Then 80 years later.
And then 80 years later, we have Jules Verne in the book, so...
Got it.
I was... yeah.
So the book, when it's written, was contemporary.
Yes.
Largely.
Yeah.
The movie, when it's filmed, is a period piece.
Yes.
So, I brought this up a little bit when we were talking about Casablanca, in that Casablanca, we see it as this... Casablanca. We see it as this, grand period piece, but at the time, it was contemporary. At the moment of its conception and creation, it was, here's the way things are now. Mm-hmm. That said, I think we can do a period piece, but we have options. We have the 1800s, we have the 1900s. We also could put this in the future.
Yeah. If we were going to do it in the future, and I've thought about this as well, we could do something in space.
We could do that as well.
Yeah.
I feel like you can't call it 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
20,000 parsecs in the galaxy, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that's fun too. I do feel like it needs to be in the ocean, just because the ocean itself is this big grand mystery. I don't know. So I was also torn. So part of the reason why I made my Professor Aronnax a lady is because here's this amazing mind that is kind of dismissed. And so I kind of had my Captain Farragut being like, look, ma'am, I get that you think you're smart, but I'm the captain here, and I can tell you we're not going to find anything. And then they find the thing because they follow her directions.
Right.
And so now all of a sudden that she finds Captain Nemo, who all of a sudden is this person who's just like, no, I've read your books. I think you're brilliant. And it's like, oh. And that immediately gives her pause of just like, this is a person who really has no preconceived sexism of the time.
Yeah.
Like, I made the first mate of the Nautilus, I also gender swapped that character. Like, I swapped those three.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that we're necessarily going to do that or any of them. But, like, as a argument for making it a period piece, you certainly could do that. My pitch, in terms of timing, was because the movie depicts tells the story as when the book was written, I would suggest that we do our remake in the 50s.
Okay.
And that way we could lean more into the retro-futuristic style aesthetic.
Sure.
And we could kind of go that way.
Yeah.
Of like pitching of in the 50s, this did exist and it is a potential future we could have had if the person who was able to come up with this technology hadn't been persecuted and driven out of the world.
Right.
That would be my pitch in terms of timing.
Right.
But you said you had a very particular pitch for this story, and I would love to hear it.
So my particular pitch, period piece, I honestly think that if we did it in the 1950s, it would still very much apply in the way I'm sort of thinking about it.
Sure.
I almost want to see this be a queer love story, or...
Great.
Because with Consul being there and being what I think he might be for Professor Aronnax, and what Professor Aronnax might think he is to Captain Nemo or vice versa, and having Ned Land along as the token hetero for a change, you know,
Who did I cast
turn
for
something
that?
on its head. I just thought that it'd be eye opening as well for so many people that there's so many.
There's some people who didn't watch Our Flag Means Death.
Yeah. That was a historical thing, that there was there's so much evidence to support that all that happened, and that being gay or queer is not a new
Like, it's a
thing.
historical comedy, but it is a historical comedy.
Yeah. And so I want to see Consul as a character see Professor Aronnax taken away from his line of sight by Captain Nemo, and not necessarily feeling like he has to compete with Captain Nemo, but being definitely broken by the fact that, like, he's shown so much time and devotion to Professor Aronnax, and Professor Aronnax being swept away by this mysterious man that Consul doesn't trust because he knows better than to just trust a stranger that kidnaps you out of the sea.
Okay.
And then having Captain Nemo be somebody that is just as mysterious, and seeing Captain Nemo through Professor Aronnax's eyes, and seeing all these characters interacting through Ned Land's heterosexual eyes. And while there's all going to be all the spectacle in my version of what I would have had, there would have been much more emphasis on what's really happening with these characters. Why are they staying on this ship? Why do they not want to leave? Because in the book, Ned Land is the one that really wants to push all of them to leave. He's the one that doesn't care about anything that's happening on this ship or out in the ocean.
Ned wants to make it to... His name is Ned Land.
Yeah, he wants to make it to
It's not
land.
subtle.
It's not. He truly, truly is a man of the sea, but he truly, truly wants to set foot on dirt once in a while. So
he wants to travel the world and sleep with a woman on every different continent.
yeah. So that was really my idea, and I had sort of this kind of like idea in mind of like, what if Greta Gerwig directed it, or Luca Guada, the guy who directed Suspiria and Call Me by Your Name.
Sure.
Guadagnino. And I wanted to see almost a version of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that was visually beautiful, but took a moment to talk about how relationships are as complicated as they can be, especially when it's with something as untrodden as, and so secretive, especially in these periods, as being queer, gay might be.
Okay. So that's the character piece, the relationships. And so so when you were thinking in terms of your remake, that's the realm you were living in. You were living in terms of like character relationships as opposed to like plot or story sort of thing.
That's really that's where I like take a lot of emphasis in my writing.
Good. Then I will do the plot and story stuff.
Okay.
For me, my twist on the original is that in the original we had Volcania.
Yeah.
And I think Volcania is really cool, but I think it deprives us of the opportunity to really live under the sea. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that they have to come to land and live on an island, if anything, takes a little bit away from the allure and the mystery of it all. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the reason they could never find Nemo's hideout is because he constructed an undersea town, city, whatever.
So, yeah.
And part of me what I really kind of wanted is for it to, like, everything to be powered by like volcanic vents and like these ocean heats. And so because they're able to tap into this volcanic power, they are able to generate, and like what Nemo's grand technology isn't anything other than being able to store the natural energy being emanated by the earth. And because he's able to do that, they can take it away, and they have this Nautilus that runs on volcanic power that they stored from the town. They have to occasionally go back to like recharge their batteries or switch it out for a new battery. Yeah. And so that's like that's their step forward in technology.
Sure.
But so we have three kind of like things that happen, and I kind of wanted to tie them all together in terms of plot. When we're in the beginning of the movie and Aronnax and Consul and Ned Land and that whole ship, they're off and exploring. They're basically just like wandering around the Pacific Ocean hoping they find the monster. Mm-hmm. That's dumb, because they have a professor on board, and if Aronnax is going to be impressing Nemo with his intellect, then there has to be something other than just like, oh, you were on board? That's great. And I think Aronnax has to sit down, and as Captain Farragut is shutting everything down, Aronnax's last-ditch effort is to take a look at every single ship that's been attacked and find the piece that was missing. Mm-hmm. Like, figure out exactly what it was that made Nemo attack these ships.
Right.
And I think it needs to be that these ships accepted a delivery from this slave colony, this encampment, whatever. And so Nemo was targeting these ships to destroy this supply.
Right.
And I think that's what it needs to be. And so they either accept a shipment from this company, or they go try to intercept a ship that has that thing. And that's where and so they actively find the Nautilus instead of passively find the Nautilus.
Yeah.
And then that also gives us reason for Nemo to reveal to Aronnax of like, oh, you figured out that I was targeting these ships. Let me tell you why I was targeting these ships. It's because this material is coming from this horrific atrocity that humanity has put forth. Mm-hmm. And so one leads to the other, and then all of a sudden Nemo's like, my goal in life is to make sure this sort of thing never ever happens again. And because I can see this thing from the earth being used and turned into a weapon, I know that that's how they would take my technology and they would turn it into a weapon. Mm-hmm. To the point where at the end of the movie, when Nemo's cornered and kind of being attacked from all sides, we can even see a twist of a version of a Nautilus in like a German U-boat or something, of this twisted, weaponized version of Nemo's technology coming to destroy Nemo.
Right.
So we get the three beats of, this is what he's targeting, here's why, Nemo was right.
Yeah.
And because we see Nemo being right, we see Nemo being like, they've already gotten that piece of my technology, I can never let them get the rest of it. Who knows what else can happen? And that's why the city under the sea and the Nautilus itself need to be destroyed to prevent any other further technology. And then you get the line at the end where Nemo says, someday the world of man might be ready for the technology that I have, but it's going to take a long time, and they're going to have to like give up being war machines in order for it to come to pass.
Yeah.
And in terms of like plot stuff, that's what I would put on while the character things are happening underneath of like, it's beat by beat following, basically make it all connected instead of it kind of just being a series of mini adventures.
Right. Exactly. And I honestly think that that's a lot better. I think that because the book also takes this kind of on a mini adventure sort of way.
Sure, and that was the style at the time, especially because it was a serialized series of it was coming out in pieces.
Yeah.
Each piece needed to be a serialized, like a little, an own little mini adventure to keep people coming back and continuing to read the series.
Absolutely. But I like where you're taking this. I think that that's really great, and I think that it still lends a lot of possibility for Captain Nemo to be mysterious.
Oh, for sure.
So,
well, especially because like we don't even have to know until the very end when we get to the hidden village under the sea what the technology is that he's protecting. Because kind of we assume it's nuclear in the movie, but we don't really know.
I think considering that it was made in 1956 and at that point in time I think it was becoming the idea. In the book, it's not nuclear.
Because that didn't exist.
Because it didn't exist. But I think that it being nuclear is great, but I also think that it being volcanic power generated and utilized in a way is also something really great.
It's like the cleanest energy.
Yeah. And there's no runoff, there's no toxic,
And that's exactly it. They can't trace it because there's nothing being left behind. There's no exhaust. And so we can't trace it, we can't figure it out, we can't find remains and try to like reverse engineer it.
Exactly.
It's just perfect and clean, and that's why
he's the man of mystery.
He's the man of mystery, and the powers that be will stop at nothing to try to get him to force him to create the technology for them.
Yeah. I love it, honestly. As a first, second, third act,
Cool. So that's the first, second, like, plot. Meanwhile, the character stuff of this romance of the mind, while also being pulled away, nature of the sea.
Yeah.
I think that works as well.
Yeah, and so I think that this...
I'm the hard outer armor, and you're the soft interior.
I'm the soft, gooey guy,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that there are ways to sort of show and emphasize with the characters how we move through all that. So I think that if we were going to do something like this, we would have Consul and Professor Aronnax together. They meet Ned Land, of course, and they bring all three of them along. Like you're saying, they by means of their own, discover and actively pursue and find the Captain Nemo's ship and everything. Once they're aboard, we start to see something where they are having to sort of come to terms with what all their relationships are all of a sudden. Because Ned Land wasn't going to disturb what Consul and Professor Aronnax had going on.
Right.
Ned Land is very much about himself.
Absolutely.
And to Consul and Aronnax were both people of the mind, not into muscly people or whatever.
And that's true. Like, Ned Land is very much a figure of the physical.
Yeah, figure of the physical. Brutish, even, if you might.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, seeing Captain Nemo and immediately having this moment where Professor Aronnax is taken away and is mesmerized by it, we start to see Consul maybe not verbally say it at first, but he doesn't like Captain Nemo.
Right.
Ned Land doesn't either, but for more obvious reasons.
Sure.
But Consul is somebody that gets to know Ned Land and sides with Ned Land more and more because he realizes that he likes Captain Nemo less and less.
It's an alliance of a common purpose.
Yeah. And so, as the characters go on, we see... Let's go ahead and hop into what the first scene between Captain Nemo, Aronnax, and Consul might be then.
Sure, tell me.
In the book, in the movie, they do fall right upon board the ship, the Nautilus, after they get rammed off of the ship. And they manage to find a way on board. Now, in the book, they like bang, they make noises. Captain Nemo comes up and takes them down so that they don't just like die at sea because there's no reason to kill them. In the movie, he tests their will to live or whatever it might be. But I think having Captain Nemo bring them on and being surprised as to how they found them, and Professor Aronnax knowing who Captain Nemo not necessarily is, but what he may or may not be doing attacking these ships,
sure,
immediately puts Captain Nemo on guard.
Right.
And so we start to see Captain Nemo, who is trying to change this perception from Professor Aronnax, is trying to seduce him so that he doesn't try and give out these secrets. And so...
Here's my question. What does Nemo get out of it?
Captain Nemo.
What does Nemo get out of this that Nemo didn't currently already have? other than just not being willing to kill someone of an intellect as high as Aronnax.
I think Captain Nemo likes Aronnax. In the books, in the movie, he's read works from Aronnax and knows that he's an intelligent person. So I think maybe what happens is when he realizes that Aronnax was one, able to track him down, and two, possibly understand some of the things that are happening on board that nobody else would be able to understand. Even the people that worked there had to be shown how it worked. He's able to deduce exactly what it is just off of some minor details that Nemo gives.
Sure.
Makes Captain Nemo realize, I'm going to keep this person around because they understand me and they might help me make my technology better. And if I keep them around, then they're mine.
Got it. So it's a calculated risk of I'm bringing someone down to the Batcave, but I'm piecing it out so that they don't get the full spectrum of it first. But eventually, maybe they can help me make a better belt and a better Batmobile.
A better cape, whatever,
All of a sudden, I have an outside opinion that I respect, and so I can potentially work to start smoothing out what might potentially be flaws that I wouldn't otherwise see. Which means that I think that is something, second half of the movie, we are going to have to start seeing. Like, before things start really, like, going, or, like, before things start crumbling and falling apart, we need to start seeing Aronnax contributing in some way of, literally, we can have Aronnax doing a rough design of a potential thing that would, like, streamline design or this, that, or the other
aqua
thing.
dynamics or even like a stronger hull design or like an alloy or something.
We can even make it as simple as this the first meal that we're having, we can have like, oh, here's all this different food, blah, 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 and it's all oceanic based. And Aronnax would say something like, I mean, what I'd really love after all of this is a biscuit. Like something like a really nice biscuit to kind of tie off the evening and like kind of make it go, like be done with this meal. And Nemo's like, I mean, there are limits to what the ocean is able to provide. And one of the things that you'll learn is that the things that tie us to land, like biscuits, are things that we can do without. And in the second half of this movie, Aronnax can take oceanic supplies and make a biscuit with the things that the ocean has provided. And I think you can even have the line of, Aronnax can say the line to Nemo of, you said once that there were limits to what the ocean can provide. I'm here to tell you that no, there is not. And it's like, oh, okay, great. So now Aronnax is starting to see. And you can even then use that to imply at the end of the movie, once everything goes down, that Aronnax has kind of been converted to the point where now that Nemo has been killed, Aronnax might even become the new Nemo.
Right. And then, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's pretty honestly great idea. And not only would it lend the idea that maybe Professor Aronnax could be the next Nemo, it becomes, like you said, they destroy it because they realize that nobody else should have this technology. That should Professor Aronnax be the next Nemo?
Yeah.
And the answer is no.
Right.
So he takes that step away after Captain Nemo goes down with the Nautilus and the city or whatever it might be, the town, the station goes down. Professor Aronnax has all these ideas that he drew up that he was going to help build. And he realizes that if I do those things, then I'll be Captain Nemo and there'll be somebody else that'll find it and create it.
Because at the end of the day, the moral of the story, the message of the movie needs to be that Nemo is right. Brutality notwithstanding, Nemo needs to be right. Methodology may be in question, but yeah. There was a moment in the movie where where Aronnax orders Consul to go do something, and Consul goes, "Yes, Captain." And then Aronnax keeps talking and goes, "Wait, what did you just call me?" And Consul's like, "I called you Captain, if that's the way you're going to be acting." And to your point, I thought that was a good moment, and just it's a moment that we should also have in ours, especially if their relationship is being strained. It's like, well, if you're acting like Captain Nemo, I'm going to refer to you as Captain Nemo.
Yeah, and then it even bleeds more into that idea that you were just sharing. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
And I think along with all of this, we have to figure out how Ned Land ties into the story.
I feel like Ned Land is the reminder of the world as it exists. And I feel like Ned Land needs to be entirely dismissed of, like, part of what makes Aronnax is that Aronnax is like, no, if you kill us, please kill me too. Like, we came here together. Like, I don't want you killing anybody.
Right.
And Nemo's like, fine, whatever. And so Ned Land needs to be dismissed as this of like, oh, he's just from the land. He has no value.
To some level, I think maybe even putting him in another uniform as the rest of the other crewmates, that Ned Land and Nemo do not see each other at all as equals, and he even sees him as a subordinate.
Right. Well, both see each other as inferior.
Yeah.
For different reasons. But what I think we're going to need to see is that in, like, the big climactic battle where Ned Land saves Captain Nemo's life, which is something that happens in the movie, I think that was I think the way it's treated in the movie is good, because it's, well, why did I save your life? Oh, if I'd thought about it for even a second, I wouldn't, but I acted on impulse, and my impulse was, here's someone in trouble and I needed to save them. And then Ned Land's like, I don't know how to handle that, I'm just going to go get drunk. But for Nemo, it's like, oh, his impulses weren't to be... His natural impulse isn't to do something. His natural impulse was, I see someone in trouble, I'm going to help them. Yeah. And that alone is confidence shaking to Nemo, because he just saw everybody as being the same, of like, anybody would be a problem. So I feel like Ned Land is the cautionary tale. Ned Land is the cautionary tale. He's the reminder that there is good even in the most brutish of people. Because Ned Land simultaneously saved Nemo's life, but is also the reason Nemo died. Because Ned Land sent out the bottles and whatever, and like that's why Nemo was found and then taken down. So I feel like there needs to be this dichotomy of like Ned Land being representative of like, oh, there is good in people, but also Nemo was right, and this dude from the land is this reason of his downfall. And I think that kind of works and lends to our version of this movie very well. Is there anything else that we might be missing from story that we want before we step into casting? I think that with seeing Captain Nemo be mysterious, with going into the second half of the story, because I truly love the Coral Cemetery scene, both in the book and I suppose in the movie, but it wasn't properly utilized in the movie. Sure. I think that we would have to include that scene, because not only does it start to take away from the mysteriousness of the character, especially with how we've been seeing him in the first act of what we've been describing in our movie, it allows us to see that Captain Nemo isn't just a man of enterprise and violence. And invention. He is a man of feeling as well. And I agree. I think that makes sense. And I think that there will be I think that will also indicate the humanity of Nemo to Consul and Ned Land, of like, instead of just being immediately dismissive of this, for all they know, pirate captain that's captured them, now all of a sudden that they like have to take a second look. And I think you're right that it has to happen in the middle of the movie, after someone is killed, whomever. Yeah. Because it could literally be someone where I don't even think it should be a named character. I think it should be someone who we never even really saw, but they happen to die. And then Nemo tells us their life story. Yeah. Somebody that helms maybe the ship when Nemo isn't captaining. Not even that important. I could literally be someone who scrubs the deck, someone who did like the absolutely most minor thing, but Nemo knew them personally, knew their life, because they were a member of Nemo's crew and they were a part of Nemo's family. Absolutely. And when we get to the coral graveyard, we can literally then have a moment where this is the next grave being placed, and then Nemo takes a moment and said, that was this man's story. And let us not forget. And then he goes down the line at every single other grave, telling the story of every single other person who passed away. Yeah. With this being set in the 1950s, like you were saying, I think that does lend the option and the opportunity for them to have radio communications in their suits. Because in the book and in the movie, they don't. And it's very straining to kind of figure out how they communicate with each other underwater. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, setting it in the 1950s, having the communications devices and having that moment is stronger. Especially because that can even be like oh my gosh, this technology, how did you get it so small? How did you do this thing of like, now's not the time for that. Now is the time for silence and retrospection and paying tribute to this person that we've lost. Right. Tim. Yeah.
Tim. Good old Tim.
I'll always remember Tim.
Yeah, everybody will.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Good. Let's talk casting. So, obviously, we have very different casting, and for the nature of the movie that we made, we're probably going to go with a lot of your people. Uh-huh. When I'm able to be like, no, I will push something forward. Yeah. For example, probably the first mate of the Nautilus and Captain Farragut, but we'll get to that. And probably Ned Land, but we'll see. But obviously we have to start with Captain Nemo. Yeah. I'll go first for this one just because my casting for Captain Nemo, I literally was a little bit cheeky, and I'm like, well, since the character is the character we like from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Yeah. And I've previously cast Captain Nemo. Okay. I just went and got the person that I cast for Captain Nemo from League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and that just seemed like the thing to do. So my cast, and I also don't know how, we'll have the conversation where we're talking about age for everybody, because
Sure.
My Captain Nemo, I think, is late 30s, early 40s. This is a actor who I know from iZombie, but he also was in The Haunting of Bly Manor. He had a role in Supergirl. This is an actor named Rahul Kohli.
Okay. Fascinating. Yeah. I know this actor. I've definitely seen him in something.
There was like a push to be like, hey, Rahul Kohli should be Mr. Fantastic. And everyone was like, it should be fucking him. And they're right, but it's not going to be. Yeah. But he's a phenomenal actor.
That's really good.
He has a British accent. Has the whole thing.
I'm going to write that down just because that's a good idea.
Who did you have for Captain Nemo?
I was kind of taking it in a different direction. I have a few different ideas, but I came about to this sort of idea based off of a photo I saw. And I don't think that we even necessarily need to cast the character as a Mediterranean, like you're saying. Sure. I'd like to see maybe Tamira Morrison.
From Book of Boba Fett?
Yes.
Who plays Boba Fett?
Yeah. He's done other stuff. I know it's very interesting, but I can see that he's able to do more serious acting and more serious parts. He's done more serious parts.
Sure.
I think that it'd be really interesting to see him. When I envision his sort of character, I see Tamira Morrison with a beard, and I see him aboard the ship. He's always been, for me in my mind, somebody that ties together people.
Okay.
So seeing him possibly be mysterious and having a crew that he brings around with him and being mysterious in that sort of fashion, I just kind of like the idea of him.
Okay. Well, we won't decide this yet until we kind of figure out our dynamic. Sure. I don't think we're going to go with my Aronnax, but please tell me who your Aronnax was.
I went with Adrian Brody.
Okay. Tell me why.
Sorry. So I was really looking for somebody, an actor, that would be able to play a whole range of emotions, as well as coming across as very intellectual and inventive. Professor Aronnax being played by Adrian Brody, who's just such a wonderful actor. I could see him crying after seeing a man that he never even knew being buried at sea in this beautiful display of coral. And then also being full of rage when he sees Captain Nemo attempting to attack seemingly an innocent ship or something like that. And then also seeing these soft, tender moments where he thought that he found an equal possibly in Captain Nemo, and then realizing that their ideals on what humanity means to them are not the same.
Okay.
So I feel like Adrian Brody is somebody that is able to go blow for blow on every sort of emotional beat and still play the intellectual type. So I was really, really into the idea. And for a long time, he was the only actor that I could think of to play Professor Aronnax.
Well, then there you go. Well, my Professor Aronnax was like, when I was thinking of it, I gender swapped the character, and I was thinking of a seduction of the mind as opposed to the body. And so I wanted someone, a woman who'd kind of been like, who could play hardened very well, of like, clearly very smart, but like the world had kind of like put all this weight down on her of like, you're a woman, we'll never take you completely seriously. And so I went with Frances McDormand.
Okay.
But Adrian Brody, for the movie that we have, is the correct choice.
Cool.
Which then gives us our consul. My consul was much younger. I was leaning towards someone who was like, obviously we can't go for like a Peter Lorre type, so I wanted someone who could be fun, but also conniving. And so I went with SNL alum, and she was in Don't Think Twice, and Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, and that's Vanessa Bayer.
Okay.
She's very fun, very like bubbly, but like also like a good actress, and so it was a different element, and I was going for a very different kind of console.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
That's not what we're doing. So who did you have for your console?
I had, this is going to be like kind of a wild pull, but Ben Whishaw. Whishaw.
Okay. I don't know this actor. I haven't seen The Lobster.
So he was in The Lobster. He was also in...
Nor have I seen Perfume.
But he was also Q in the Daniel Craig James Bond movies.
Yeah.
Going with this sort of like possibly queer sort of storyline, he is somebody that I think has come out as queer. And so having him play an intellectual who sees himself as being equal with...
He's older than I thought he was.
He's in his 30s.
He's 42.
Is he 42?
Yeah.
Well, he looks real good.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that he'd be a wonderful person to go toe-to-toe with somebody like Adrian Brody and be sensitive to Adrian Brody's Professor Aronnax, and would almost be, you know, juxtaposed to Captain Nemo, who would be possibly older or possibly, like, just a different, like, still piratey, you know?
Sure.
Instead of, like a school sort of intellectual.
Yeah.
So Ben Whishaw being somebody that aspires to be with Adrian Brody's Professor Aronnax, and then having to go blow for blow with this not only handsome but intellectually beautiful Captain Nemo, I thought that he would have been a great choice.
I agree. I think that is an excellent pull. With that in mind, I am going to push us towards Rahul Kohli for Nemo.
Absolutely. All good on that.
And I kind of like it that of the three of them, Rahul Kohli is the youngest. Mm-hmm. Rahul Kohli is 37, so he's 5 years younger than Ben Whishaw and 13 years younger than Adrian Brody.
Okay.
And I really like the idea of, like, Consul having this moment of, like, you just like him because he's young and attractive and all of these things. Like, Consul can even be, eavesdropping and spying on them, and they have this incredibly close, tender moment. But it's over, like, a petri dish. Mm-hmm. And it's, like, it's truly a seduction of the mind and everything. Mm-hmm. And, like, Consul absolutely should be worried. And Aronnax is definitely being drawn away. But it's not because of, like, the youth and the attractiveness of this guy. It's because he is just that brilliant. And he is this enigma. And how could he have all this knowledge and still be so young?
Yeah.
And that's why it's even more of a tragedy. Like, at the end when he's like... Dude, you're 37 and you're literally sacrificing everything so people can't get the information in your head. Mm-hmm. So that works for me. That brings us to Ned Land.
You want me to go first, or would you like to go first?
I think it's your turn.
I thought long and hard, and I did a good few searching up. And I thought, you know, I'd really love to cast somebody Canadian to play this Canadian.
That's
in the
fair.
movie, he's like, I'm Canadian. In the book, he's like, I'm Canadian. And I thought Jared Keeso would be great. Keeeso. Jared Keeso is from Shoresy and from Letterkenny, and he's usually a comedy actor, but I feel like I've seen him in other things where he plays a more serious role, and when he does interviews, you can see who he is as a serious person.
Sure.
And I thought seeing him, he's fairly tall and fairly burly, and seeing him go almost be a brutish pirate with a sense of humor to him, but still a little bit of charm and also a bit of brutishness I keep coming back to, I thought that it'd just be a fun idea.
I've definitely seen some of the things he's in. He hasn't made a particular impact on me one way or the other.
Sure.
But yeah, great pull. My option for Ned Land is I wanted someone who has been a lackey in a lot of different things, but with a wry wit about him.
Sure.
And I felt like it would be weird if we went through this whole thing without casting anybody from Our Flag Means Death.
Okay.
So this particular actor has been in Our Flag Means Death. He's been in Game of Thrones, and he was in Cruella. He's Jasper in Cruella. His name is Joel Fry.
Okay. All right.
And, like, he's less the common leading man style of attractive, which... Obviously, Kurt Russell at the time absolutely was. Kirk Douglas, excuse me. He definitely has that moment in the beginning where he's singing his little song and he turns around and shakes his butt at camera. Mm-hmm. Like, we get what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But, like, this is... Joel Fry is what I'll call ocean attractive.
Yeah. He's got that curly... You almost see, like, you could imagine him posted up on a dockside with a bag waiting to just board the ship.
But he's also very, very funny.
Yes.
But he's like a dry kind of sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I think that that'd be kind of fun for the Ned Land character, where once again I'm trying to be a different sort of person than like, because we're never going to recapture the Kirk Douglas magic. He's a different human being.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be like, okay, that sort of character, but in a different, more modern way. And so that's why I was leaning towards Joel Fry.
I think Joel Fry is actually probably the better decision.
Cool. So then I have the First Mate and Captain Farragut. Did you also have those characters, or we reached the end?
I didn't have those characters. I realized, like, going back that, yeah, those were some pretty, I guess, important characters, but...
They were enough.
They were enough.
Do you have any other acting characters, or it was those four, and then we'll get to writer-director in a minute?
I didn't. Those were my big four, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the First Mate. This is another one of the characters that I gender swapped. And I wanted a tough woman. So a tough woman who, like, you could see as like, oh, does she have a relationship with Captain Nemo? No, she's just tough and good at the job.
Yeah.
And so I wanted someone who we've seen be tough. And so I cast Sheila the She-Wolf from Glow. Do you remember in Glow, the woman who plays the character who is a wolf? She's also in Perry Mason. She's in House of the Dragon. Her name is Gail Rankin.
Well, you know, I haven't watched Glow, but that's certainly an interesting pick. That'd be a lot of fun, yeah, especially as like a first mate. Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me when it comes to imagining all these characters is I have no idea what they're wearing. I'm just looking at these characters' faces.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So,
as a costumer, I feel like that's important.
Yeah, I have no idea how to dress these characters, and that's one of the most fun things about this whole movie for me.
That's fun, especially if we do end up doing retro-futuristic style. Like, that's rad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then so for my Captain Farragut, who's the captain of the ship that gets destroyed by Nemo, and then the three people end up on Nemo's ship, the one who dismisses Aronnax. And so I kind of wanted just like, especially because I wanted at the time when I thought it was going to be Frances McDormand, I was like, I want someone who's just like the most pompous British asshole, just like, I would never think to take a suggestion from a woman. We shouldn't even have you on this ship. And obviously this person doesn't speak with that accent, but like that was kind of the thing I was going for. And so this is a guy who's been in All Creatures Great and Small. He's been in Peaky Blinders. He had a role in Rogue One. And this actor is named Tony Pitts. And he's just generic white guy, kind of square-shaped. Tony Pitts.
Okay. Yeah,
I don't want it to be distracting with, like, here's some other big name of, like, I'm Matthew McConaughey and this ship's going down.
Yeah, you don't need a Bradley Cooper playing a halfling in Dungeons & Dragons situation, yeah.
That said, I enjoyed that. But
that
yes,
was great.
But yes, you're correct.
It's like the same, yeah.
But yeah, and also, that was very distracting.
It was great, yeah. But it was also very distracting.
But yeah, so I was like, yeah, that sort of character. Anyway, so those are our 6 actors. That brings us to our writer and to our director. Now, I think the first thing we need to do before discussing any of that is we need to take for a second to talk about why it can't be James Cameron.
Because I don't like him.
Neither do I, and it shouldn't be James Cameron. And I feel like for a movie that, like, obviously it was the 1950s and things were practical by necessity, but something that was just, like, a marvel to look at, and you compare it to, like, all of James Cameron's, like, ocean movies now, where he's like, well, we made this in a computer, and it's like, but then you're not showing us the actual cool things. We want to actually be wowed and incredibly amazed by what's actually in the ocean.
You know, when I was thinking about this, I didn't think about that angle. So give me 1 second to look up, because I have an idea, but I don't know the name of the director.
Well, what I think we'll end up doing is I think we're likely to go with your writer, and there's a decent possibility we'll go with my director.
Okay.
And the reason why is because I think for the director, we need the visual stylings, and we need everything to look incredible, and we need an incredible world to be designed.
Right.
But to get to the personality, the personality, the deeply personal, the emotions, the character connections, I think we probably want the writer that whoever you were thinking of. Now, I don't know who you were thinking of, but that's assuming what you were leaning towards.
Right. I was thinking of something like Greta Gerwig when I was thinking of this as a much more character-based sort of story.
Sure.
But then you brought in such great plot that we would have to weave both together.
I mean, it's still 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is, for lack of anything else, a blockbuster summer movie.
Sure.
That we then surprise everybody by having heartfelt, emotional character beats.
Yes. Much like the new Barbie movie will probably be.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Me too. I'm going to be buying a ticket as soon as they go on sale.
But I think of Greta Gerwig as being like a writer-director.
Exactly.
So are you pitching her as a writer-director?
I might be, if only I might toss out my director in this same sentence.
Of course, please.
I think Gore Verbinski.
Why Gore Verbinski?
He did Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl, and At World's End, and Dead Man's Chest. And while you can say what you want about those movies, No?
Sorry, keep going.
Okay.
He also directed The Lone Ranger.
Right, which is not so great. But,
I'm sorry, continue.
But in terms of his ability to bring characters together in touching ways, and then also having this... He already has practice with handling ocean, going to sea and everything like that for filming. I feel like he'd be somebody well mastered to go about making something like this possibly a reality.
Fair. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So that's your pair.
Greta Gerwig sort of story. If she wasn't directing, maybe a Gore Verbinski style director.
Sure, that makes sense. I had a writer who I know is good at doing character stuff, but also very much lives in the world of like fantasy and like can write incredibly interesting and compelling worlds. And this is a writer named Javier Grillo Marxwatch.
Okay.
He created the show The Middleman, but he's currently a writer on The Witcher. I don't know if he was the showrunner or the number 2 on that Dark Crystal remake.
Okay.
That show. And so like that's a Henson show. So it's a world with like practical characters and interesting things. And like that's the sort of thing he writes.
Sure.
And I just thought, and he's worked on all sorts of stuff like that. And so I thought he'd be a really good person for this. I think his first job was on Ugly Betty. So like he's worked on a variety of different shows.
Okay.
And my director, I went with Guillermo del Toro.
He just gets it.
Yeah. And I so rarely go for like a big director for something like this. Like I often try to find like the TV person, and so many other people come to my show and pitch Guillermo del Toro. But this is one of those rare instances where I'm like, I need this world to be perfect and I need it to be practical. And you take, like, despite the fact that I know he knows CGI, like Troll Hunter is an incredible show.
Pacific Rim
Pacific Rim is also CGI, but it's also like this incredible world building. But like you take your Pacific Rims, but then you also take your Hellboys, which are largely practical, mixed with
CGI.
the CGI.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Pinocchio, where it's all this stop motion of like, the man knows how to create a world and he knows how to dazzle us. And I feel like for the director, that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
But then I think Greta Gerwig for the script makes sense.
Yeah.
That would be wild.
That'd be
Greta
wild.
Gerwig writing a script that's
1-2.
directed by Guillermo del Toro.
It would be the ideal way to go about making this.
It would.
It would.
Despite their schedules, somehow they were both available. We don't know how it happened, but that's the magic of Ideal Remake.
Great.
Yeah.
That's the magic.
Yep. But yeah, that makes sense. So, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which, for anyone keeping track or being snide, that title means that they have traveled 20,000 leagues while under the sea.
It's not Fathoms. Fathoms is up and down.
Yep. They have traveled laterally for 20,000 leagues whilst under the sea. Anyway, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Captain Nemo will be played by Rahul Kohli. Professor Aronnax will be Adrian Brody. Consul will be Ben Whishaw. Ned Land will be Joel Fry. The First Mate will be Gail Rankin. Captain Farragut will be Tony Pitts. This will be written by Greta Gerwig and directed by Guillermo del Toro. That's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Presley, you gonna go see this movie?
I would absolutely go and see this movie.
Hell yeah. That's a podcast. We did it. You have recorded your first podcast. Congratulations.
Awesome.
So, A, thank you so much for being my guest, but now B, tell people about if you want them to follow you online or anything else this is your moment. Tell people to do a thing.
Well, this is the part where I go ahead and follow me on Instagram.
Correct.
If you look up Presley Peters, I'll be there. My handle is I am the dude, my dudes, with underscores as spaces. So Presley Peters will be just a lot easier. It's PresleyPeters.
Good idea.
That's my handle. Please feel free to reach out to me. I love this story. If Greta Gerwig doesn't listen to this podcast and write it, then, honestly, it's such a good story, I may just try and do it myself.
I support it.
And
it's a different enough story that if you changed the title, you could probably get away with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure it's like public domain to write 20,000 Leagues as a movie.
That's also true.
So.
Yeah, fair enough.
There you go.
If you're interested in following me, I am on Twitter at Sam Gasch, SamGasch. Time of recording, Twitter still exists, but if it doesn't by the time of this episode being released, great. You can also follow the podcast on Instagram at Ideal Remake, or more importantly, you can go into the show notes and join the Dueling Genre Discord. You can talk to me and I will talk to Presley about what we did wrong or what we did right. And I want to know what your experience is with 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I think that that's fun. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, if you wouldn't mind going on Apple Podcasts and leaving a 5-star review, that's how new people and strangers can find the show, and that's always very welcome. But more important than anything else, if you could tell a friend about the show, that would be great. I would appreciate it. But now, I will end this podcast the same way I end all podcasts. Presley, what is your favorite quote from the movie or book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea?
You know, I kind of said it earlier. My favorite scene in the book is the moment where they come back from the coral cemetery and he says, yes, safe from the sharks and from the men. So
we've presented you a podcast episode that is itself safe from the sharks and from the men. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.